Hello everybody, welcome to this video. I haven't made a video in a while now. I've kind of been MIA, but I'm back. I got a couple things I want to talk about, and then I'm going to be answering some questions from ChatGPT. The video is called Never Conform because it's basically talking about how you should always like stay hungry, right? Be wanting more. That's kind of like the idea from this video, and I'm going to be talking about a lot of different ideas here. The first one is starting with Jodorowsky. And Jodorowsky was talking about dreams and how in dreams you can basically do the psychomagic act, which is like this symbolic like act that you do. You could do it in real life too, which is like to heal wounds, but you can do it in dreams. Now, I was reading this part and it's kind of interesting, but I'm not like that engaged with it. But he said something about like how basically he didn't say it in these words, but I'm gonna be like paraphrasing. There's a problem with identity. And I know I've made like my whole section on identity, but now I'm gonna contradict myself and say, because I agree with this idea that if you define yourself, ultimately what you're doing is you limit yourself, right? Defining yourself limits yourself. And if you say, I'm this, you're limiting yourself to that. Now, it's important here, I think, to try on different suits, right? So you can be this type of person today, and then tomorrow be a different type of person, right? And put on like different masks, like Joseph Campbell or Carl Jung's different types of archetype masks, right? But yeah, very quickly, there's a problem with identity is that people that define themselves by something or with someone, like a celebrity or something like that, is gonna limit who you could be. Is gonna limit your potential, right? So I'm guilty as charged of this because I have like a lot of people and a lot of things and a lot of ideas that I identify myself with. So it was kind of like a bucket of cold water, right? Where I was kind of like, okay, yeah, you're right. Like I need to let go of all that stuff and stop trying to define myself, right? And just basically focus on basically walking the road less traveled, right? Like I said in a song that just came out right now in the album Ancient Teachings. Okay, so this is going, and also here I want to touch on another thing, which is like the impulsive ideas that I sometimes have, right? Like I have big dreams and I get these like really passionate moments where I'm like, I'm going to do this and that, and I'm going to, change the world. And then, like reality doesn't live up to my expectations, and that kind of throws me down in the gutter. So I'm gonna avoid doing that from now on, where I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm totally gonna do this because I just saw a video of Rockefeller making a business, and now I'm gonna make my own business. And it's kind of like, and I just get let down. So it's kind of like, watch out for that, for those type of things, right? Okay, so I'm going to be talking secondly about the different ways of thinking. People have different ways of thinking. Of course, there are a lot of them. I think there's the very common general ones where basically people operate under certain societal norms, and those are just like well established, right? In the pattern of thinking, and people aren't original or creative. They're just kind of like they go with the flow of what's already established. But there's a couple other ones, like for example, and I was thinking about this because I saw it like on something I was researching. Lately, I've been using ChatGPT a lot for that. Thinking by association or correlation is not causation. Now, causation, this is where we enter like that type of territory where, and this could be to blame for my way of thinking where I say, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go from. Okay, excuse the interruption there. I had to go and do something very quickly, but I'm back. Okay, so I was talking about causation and how a lot of people, you could say, yeah, this is part of maybe the problem. Causation is a scientific idea where basically you're relating, or you view the relationship between something that causes something else, right? Like they show these graphs. If you look up like the difference between correlation versus causation, you'll see these graphs where like there's a decline in like ice cream sales, and there's also a decline in crime, for example, and that's correlation, that's association, that's not causation, because you can make the mistake of saying, oh, when ice cream sales drop, crime also drops, and if ice cream sales go up, crime will go up, right? But that's not causation. One thing doesn't cause the other thing, right? But it's easy to assume those type of things because we associate, right? Now, association is very useful because it can give you like a broader perception of things. So it does have its benefits. So association and correlation here are kind of like the same, which is just kind of like taking ideas from here and correlating them and unifying them, right? But again, it's not causation. It's not that this caused that. They actually call it casuation or something like that, which is casual. It's not cause, right? Um, but yeah, if you think by association, this could lead to better, more stimulating ideas. And I think this is more of like the artistic, creative endeavors that people will take up, right? They will use association to come up with like all of these theoretical ideas and philosophical, which again is like more of the area where I'm at. So I think going back to the idea of different ways of thinking, there are people that think more in terms of causation, right? Like more realistically, more empirically, more scientifically, more objectively, and they'll say, yeah, this doesn't cause this, right? And there are like people more idealistic, more like dreamers, where they'll just see the association, and even though it's not that valid, or it's not that strong, right? The argument's not that strong, or the correlation is not that strong. We'll just like take it as loosely as it is, right? Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about originality and our obsession as a society, as a modern society, that we have with it. We're so obsessed, and I'm myself included, with like having new things, right? And we see this like specifically with like works of entertainment, movies, stories, right? If we see a movie and something happens in that movie that we've already seen in another movie, we think of it as like less valuable, right? We say, oh, they just copied that, right? And we have a problem with people copying things, with plagiarism, right? We say, oh, that's already been done, like that person has no original things. And we're always looking for new things, for new music, for new movies, for new ideas, right? I'm guilty of this. So our society is a society of non-repetition. We do not like repeated things, right? We expect things to constantly be innovating and updating, right? Even at the cost of efficiency. And I think I've spoken on this before, but yeah, like think about applications that have recently had updates, and the update just makes it all confusing. Or recently, like I had an app for the weather from Google, and it had an update, and now it doesn't even, like, it used to give like almost accurate weather patterns, predictors, and now it totally like doesn't give, like, it says it's gonna rain, or it says it's raining and it's not even raining, right? And that was because of an update it had, right? Which I thought was completely unnecessary. And we have this need for constant originality, right? I don't know what the deal is there. Okay, and then this idea I had a couple days ago or weeks ago, where I was thinking like society or civilization, if you think about a city, it's basically a bunch of division among individuals, right? Like think about houses and buildings in a city, and how like all of it divides individuals, right? Like it's kind of paradoxical. And I think I got this idea from a video I was viewing on like mind control or social engineering, but within a society, and how it's trying to make, how it's set up to make people in a city like close to one another, but at the same time distant from each other. And I was thinking about this, how like like the walls, like the physical walls between houses, right, that separate you from the outside, the walls in your house that separate you from your family members, right? And then these like psychological walls, where like anytime you have contact with someone, right? Like in a professional setting or on the street or something, you always have that need to put up a wall, right? Like you'll make contact with that person, like, hey, I need a coffee, right? A cup of coffee. It will be so much, boom. And after that transaction is finished, wall, right? The wall goes up again. And it's like, we're not talking, right? So I found that to be interesting how, like, the division and walls around the city could be viewed, and society could be viewed as a metaphor for human interaction as well, where in human interaction, we're constantly looking for those walls to be put back in place so we don't have to talk to like anybody, right? Of course, there are people that will bring down those walls and just chat because they just want to live in the moment and talk with friends or whatever without any goal oriented activity in mind or intention in mind. And I think this is because, and this is the part where I'm going to get into never conform. There are some people that are satisfied with life, or at least aren't dissatisfied or unsatisfied. And there are people that are unsatisfied. And this particularly points to having life's answers. There are people that don't know, I think everybody doesn't know what we're doing here, what we are, right? What the hell is going on in the world? What is this rock we're on this universe? But there are people that don't question that. They're okay living their life. And there are people that aren't, right? And my question for you is, are you satisfied with your life, right? Are you satisfied, or are you constantly looking for something new, right? Which, again, this would go hand in hand with that originality idea, with that non-repetition idea of like, I don't want to, like I was asking some of my students this weekend in class because we were checking out the topic of fame, right? Of celebrities. And I asked them, like, would you guys like to be famous? And all of them said no. Some said that it was because it would be a big responsibility. Others said that it was because they would have to watch everything they said and did because they would be judged if they made a mistake. And I was like, bro, man, like if it were up to me, I would love to be famous, because like I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about, but that just tells you about the different types of personalities. I thought it was a very good criteria point to use on people. Just go up to them and ask them, like, would you like to be famous? And if they say no, then they're that type of passive, like, person that just basically wants to stay out of everybody's way and kind of like not do much or not make changes or not look for better ways of doing things. But if it's a person that says, yes, I would, then you could tell it may be that type of unsatisfied person, but that's constantly looking to do something, right? To make better changes or do something with life in general. Now, these ideas of supreme, ultimate human intentions, I think a while back I said that unity, unity with the all, with the God. A lot of people say that's the end goal of human life. And I was questioning that. I was like, maybe, because I don't know if you guys have seen my other videos where I spoke on truth and good. The ultimate intention of human life is seeking truth. No. The ultimate intention of human life is seeking good. No. And the ultimate intention of human life is seeking unity with the all and with everybody and with the whole universe. And I was kind of like, maybe. And no, it's not that either. So for me, and I think I may have said this before, it's the process. The process, it's what's important. Now, there's a strong emphasis currently in our society that's being put on goodness, on truth, on unity, and I think they're good procedural values. That means that they are values that you can use in the process to improve society, but they're not the end goals, right? I don't think there are end goals, and these values aren't absolute because their counterparts are also necessary. Lying, there's a benefit to lying. Bad, there's a benefit to bad too, right? Like, and I don't really mean it in the collective sense, but more in the individual sense. Like the shadow that you have in yourself also needs to be integrated, and I'm going to be talking about that in a moment. But you can't ignore it. You can't just say I'm going to be all good, right? I'm going to be all fit and go to the gym and ignore like the other bad parts that exist inside of you, right? Because we all have them. Unless you don't have them, then fine, that's cool, but I doubt you don't have them. And unity, no, like you need your space too. You need to be individualistic. You do need unity, but you also need isolation, right? Like one of the things that I'm most proud of, I think I'm going to get that into that in the questions in a moment, is being able to have lived alone by myself for years. I don't think most people can do it, right? They end up like going back with their families, or getting with someone, because it's hard. I think that's one of the hardest things you can do in life: being by yourself, staying by yourself, living by yourself. So yeah, for me, the process is more important. We don't know what the end goal is, right? We just don't. And we have to be humble enough to admit that, right? We need to be smart enough to admit that we don't know. And it's not truth, it's not goodness, it's not unity, right? I see a lot of this because I'm studying like the whole chaos magic thing, which I think is awesome, the esoteric teachings, the ancient teachings. And they talk a lot about unity, right? How like like Aleister Crowley, how like basically being one with the all, and you're God, and this idea of like when you see God, you see a mirror, and it's yourself, and it's the unity, and that's the end goal. And it's like, no, shut up. Like I don't believe that. Okay, so now people that say all you need to do is find that which you love, so you don't have to work a day in your life, are also generalizing something that is actually special and unique. I don't think most people, because think about this. This is also an idea I was thinking about. People that are very successful do what they do all the time. They're obsessed. They're addicted to that, right? Which in itself may not be healthy as it is. But to be able to do that, I mean, think about what you like. How long can you do it for? Right? Like you can't do it that long. Even if it is something that makes you lose track of time, eventually you kind of get tired of it. Eventually you kind of need a break from it, right? So finding a person that likes what they do, like no matter how long they do it, excuse me, is very unique. And they are a special type of person. And maybe they do uh, how can I say that? I got like I got tongued up with my words. They do need, they don't need it. They should get that type of respect and admiration and celebrity status that they do have, because not everybody can do that. I don't believe just anybody can, oh, let me just look at what I love doing and let me do that for work and then just not have to work a day in my life. I think that's hard. And I think most people, even if you do seek it out, it's kind of hard to find it, because again, you're going to have moments where you're just not going to want to do that anymore, and you're going to want to move on to something else, right? I think about myself like with music or making these videos or studying, right? It's like something that I like, but I don't see myself doing it like all the time to the point where I become like celebrity status with it, right? So yeah, it's hard to find. I don't think it all depends on hard work. Hard work is part of it, but you also need luck, right? And chance. Chance is a big part of it. Now I'm going to contradict myself right here. And just this weekend, I read about this person called Sophie Christiansen, and she's a horseback rider who actually had like cerebral palsy. I think she was born sick, and she needed physiotherapy. And in order to make physiotherapy fun, she would ride horses. Now, from a tragedy or from this like disaster comes something beneficial, something good, which is she becomes like a world famous horse rider, right? And that's interesting, because then you say, well, maybe you haven't tried everything, right? Like her, but she did this when she was like 6 years old. So, I don't know how much of it depended on her, like actually, needing fun in physiotherapy, and how much she would have maybe ended up horseback riding anyway, because maybe that's what her family did. I don't know. I don't really know her biography, but if her family did it, she may have gotten engaged in it anyway, or maybe she might have liked it, but she may have not pursued it as intense as she did if she wasn't ill, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, this begs the question, like, what if you haven't really tried everything there is? And what if there's something out there that you haven't tried that you would actually be obsessed with and, be really good at, and you would get like world famous for it, right? Who knows? All right, now I'm going to get into the idea of Carl Jung and finding the opposites inside of you. So, whenever there's a problem or a tense, problematic situation, what Carl Jung says is basically it has two energies, and I completely agree with this part. Um, there are two energies or two forces at work, and typically one of them is unconscious, right? One of them, or partially unconscious now, if you're watching this video and you're thinking about it. So let's say you have a problem with family and you hate family, right? A part of you loves family, right? And that's the part where I say, it's unconscious because you're not aware of it, or you're just gonna deny it and say no, that's not it. I truly hate it. But you need to recognize in you that there's that other part that actually longs for it, right? Now the problem here is reconciling these two different forces that are at work, which are actually, cognitive dissonance opposite forces. One of them, you can think of it as your ego. It's you. It's not like selfish. It's your ego. It's your conscious self. And the other one is the shadow. Now the shadow, I think, oftentimes gets mixed up with like bad things, and it's not necessarily bad things, what society would call bad things, but it's actually the part of yourself that you don't want to see, right? So it's anything that you don't consider yourself to be you, right? Like in this case, if you hate family, it's like loving family, right? That would be your shadow. Like, no, like that's not me, right? But it is you, right? So the question here is, do you need to integrate it? Or, oh yeah, and that's the part I agree with. Now, the part I don't agree with, which again, Carl Jung was a psychoanalyst first and foremost, and he was heavily influenced by Freud, and Freud and Carl Jung made a lot of things sexual. So he says that it's a sexual like cause, and it needs, like, I don't know if it needs a sexual solution, but it's like a sexual cause basically trying to manifest itself. So you could be like, what am I thinking, incest, or but Carl Jung says just the mere fact that a lot of people don't agree with it is like reason enough to believe that it's true, right? And I'm like, could be. I mean, like, as a society currently, I think we're seeing a lot of different sexual manifestations, like with the whole LGBT community, and it could be due to repression, because Carl Jung ultimately says that which is repressed eventually is going to come out one way or another. So society has repressed people sexually for so long, right, for centuries, that nowadays people are just like coming out, like, and a lot of these movements are sexual, right, in nature. So that's kind of interesting to see. But we also get into the trouble of, like, let's forget about the sexual thing for a little bit, because I'm not really I don't really know about it. I haven't really read on it. But we have a problem with this integration of the extremes or the middle, which I already made a video talking about this. And it's like, how do you reconcile this? Do you go from one extreme to the other extreme? Like, I love family, I hate family. Or do you try to meet it in the middle and kind of say, like, I'm going to have my moment, which, again, what is the middle if not the back and forth between extremes, right? So it's how do you solve that problem, like mental inner problem, emotional, psychological problem that you have, right? Do you reconcile it? Do you just ignore it? Do you kind of like, give this side time and the other side also time? You give time to hate family but also love family. Like how would it work? And also society, this is where I'm going to get into the bad things, and I've actually spoken on this topic before when I spoke about like the mouth thing that we do, like a lot of pacifying behaviors like that babies do. For example, they suck their thumb, As adults, we smoke cigarettes, we drink, we eat, right? A lot of things with the mouth. We bite our nails to pacify because we're nervous. But there are also bad things this is so funny. Like, I was just thinking about this the other day, and I was like, it's so funny how society will claim that many things are bad, yet they exist. They keep manufacturing them. They're legal, and the people that I bet you the people that say that they are bad use them or have them repressed, right? For example, porn, alcohol, cigarettes, casinos, candy, chocolate, fast food, social media, cars, video games, cosmetics, just to name a few, right? How many people, for example, will claim that, global warming is real, we're destroying our planet, yet they have like 3 or 4 cars. Every family member has a car, right? Or like people that will claim, like drinking is bad, or you shouldn't do anything bad, any wrongdoing, and yet they drink alcohol. Or the problem with porn, that people say porn makes you demotivated, it makes you antisocial, and it exists, it's free. It's like it's so out there. Why don't they just ban it, right? And then they'll say, well, it's because we give people freedom to choose and things like that. It's like, then just shut up and stop saying that it's a bad thing, because again, it's part of that integration of the shadow. See, we all have that. We all have this good side and this bad side, and it's about learning. It's about knowing how to live with both of those sides inside of us, right? Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this part is because is related to people, right? And just there are like so many societal rituals, like the societal norms that I was talking about earlier, that like lately I've been watching this Japanese series, and or just the Japanese things, and how they have to like constantly bow, and like German and Spanish have 2 different ways to address a second person, like you formal and you informal, like tú usted. And like all of these complicated traditions, right, that I think reduce effectiveness. I mean, I understand why they're there. They're there to control the beasts that live inside all of us, right? Like that criminal intent. And, like they say, a baby has to be domesticized because when it's born, it's basically a killer, right? Like, imagine a baby, like full grown, it would be like a big insect, right? Like, I was watching The Mist, and these insects that Stephen King brings to life as a big insects are basically just walking around killing humans, eating humans, not because they're like, I want vengeance, but because that's just who they are. That's their instinct. That's their natural instinct, right? To crush, to kill, and like a baby would do the same, right? So we have these rituals in society, right? Religion, all these things that make us behave, right? Like, get in this box, you. But nowadays, especially with like the whole internet and social media and the worldwide phenomena that we're seeing, I think it's not necessary. And there's actually something very interesting here. Again, I don't know if this is causation or association and correlation, but check this out. People that live in poor countries have more realistic manners or ways of doing things, with exception of Japan. But for example, South Korea, China, India, Thailand, Vietnam, Ethiopia, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, and Ghana are some of the countries that ChatGPT told me have the most ritualistic, complex ways of dealing with people, right? Like, you have to bow, you have to speak to your elders differently, you have to use like coded language and speak indirectly. You can't just straight out bluntly say like, hey, you have to address people with a title. You can't talk to people or communicate with them on a first name basis. Like, it's all very muddy and weird and complex. And then you have countries, the top countries like the United States, Australia, Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark, Canada, New Zealand, Ireland, Norway, and Finland, which are countries that do not have that type of ritualistic thing. You can actually talk to anybody on a first name basis. Communication is very direct and efficient. You say what you mean and you mean what you say, and these are some of the richest countries in the world. So, this begs the question, like, is again causation, correlation, or causation or correlation and association. Is it could it be that part of that culture of being so ritualistic in society makes it harder for a society to thrive? Now again, we would have to establish the criteria of what success is, because here I'm using the criteria of monetary success, economic success, which I think is the criteria that everybody uses anyway. But if you say no, these ritualistic, family oriented societies are richer because, emotionally they are better off because of the family members and, the unity that they have and the love and the bonding. Okay, well, that's valid too. It depends on what your criteria of success is. But I think everybody wants money nowadays. So you would just be fooling yourself if you said you didn't want it. Okay, now I'm going to get into the questions. I have here 8 different sections. The first one talks on history and politics. And I'm just going to be answering these questions kind of quickly. The first one says, if you could travel back in time to any historical event and observe it firsthand, which event would you choose and why? I'm like an amateur fan of history. I do like it. And I think there's a lot to learn from it. But if I could choose a historical event, I think I really admire or want to maybe look more into like Mexican history. I think maybe I would seriously go back to like the Mexican Revolution, and I would like to have been witness to everything that was going on from like 19 maybe from like 1905, or maybe even when like Porfirio was like the president, all the way to like the late 1930s, like right before World War II, because I think that ultimately shaped Mexico like completely. I would like to witness all of those changes and live them. And the second one, how do you think modern politics would change if leaders were required to live in the same conditions as their citizens for a year? Oh, that's a good one. But I don't think it would be enough with the leaders. I think it's the whole leadership, right? Like the whole parliamentary thing, because um, then you would just have like a leader very aware of the situation in the country, that would be like constantly antagonizing the elites, right? Um, but the question is, how do you think modern politics would change? I think leaders would be able to give this worldview, more realistic worldview, to the elites and the decision makers and the policy makers and the legislators and the Senate and all that. Um, I think it would be an interesting thing, like I've always thought this idea of like, if two countries are at war, just have their presidents fight each other off, right? Fight each other off. But like, yeah, just have them fight, instead of like the army and killing a bunch of young people. Okay, now the second section is creative writing and music. It asks, what message or theme do you find most important to convey through your rap songs, and why? The most important theme I find, uh, the most important theme I find the most important to convey through my rap songs and just in general through my videos, I think is the process, the procedural. I don't know if it's correct to call it the procedural intention, which is basically like focusing on the process, right? Like learning, right? Like I found myself a lot of times listening to a song or watching a movie or something, and something pops up, and like I go on Google and like Google it, right? Like, what is that? And then I learn something, right? So it's like the process of learning. I think that's what I try to ultimately convey. I'll talk like in my rap songs, and here I'll talk about like a lot of different ideas from everywhere, And ultimately, what I'm trying to get at is at poking interest in other people, right? Like for people to say, what is that? Let me check it out, right? Let me learn something new. And I do that because I like to think and I like to make other people think. And how do you think your personal experiences influence your creative work? Well, again, it's that learning experience. I think if I'm constantly learning, I also want other people to like be learning, right? Um, so yeah, it's kind of like that. Okay, the third section, learning and education. It says, in what ways do you think the current education system could be improved to better support students' unique talents and interests? This is a hard one. I think education is the way it is. I don't think it's going to change, even though it's constantly changing for the better or whatever. But I think that in order not only to detect students' unique talents and interests, but also to have better education, you need committed teachers. You need committed people, right? You need committed communities. You need people that are genuinely interested and have that leadership quality, which we need so much nowadays, to actually that initiative to say like, oh hey, like I clearly see that this is something that you like, and you could be good if you did this or that, or if you contacted this other person or whatever, right? Because a lot of people will just say like, oh good job, and just like clap, right? But they won't actually, I mean, there's a lot of moral and emotional support. I understand that part, but there's not technical support, right? There's no effective support, right? There's no support that's actually going to take you somewhere, right? And then if students also don't commit to their interests and their talents, then that's why it would be a society. It would be everybody, right? Parents, students, teachers, everybody. And if you were to design a curriculum for a history course, what unconventional or lesser known events would you include to make the subject more engaging? So I'm going to be totally influenced right now by the book I'm reading on The Mystery of the Capital by Eduardo de Soto. But he's talking a lot about property rights, and how poor people are basically poor because they're not integrated into the property system of a government. So I didn't know this notion of shot the sheriff actually comes from the invaders, they would call them, which were basically immigrants in the United States that came from like Europe or wherever, and they settled down in some land that wasn't theirs because they didn't buy it, but it wasn't regulated by the government either. And then when the government wanted to regulate it, the people said, no, we're not paying anything, but we're also not leaving. And the government would send in the sheriffs to take the people out, like physically, but the people would defend themselves and shoot the sheriffs. And that's where that whole notion of like, I shot the sheriff comes from. So I would design the history of like property regulation, and how all of that government inadaptation affects like economic or how it affects people economically. There's a lot of things that we don't know, but not because it's not out there, but because we weren't taught about it in school. We weren't, it's not popular, right? It's not popular. Like we can talk about Hitler. Everybody knows Hitler. Everybody knows World War II. But do you know what happened in 1760 in Massachusetts, and the problems that Massachusetts and Maine had, right? Or like I asked ChatGPT, like, let me know what states have had problems with each other, right? Like California and Nevada, New Jersey and New York, Missouri and Oklahoma, I think, have had problems. And a lot of these problems that states have between each other is because of water resources, right? So I found that to be very interesting. So I would include all of those lesser known events in a history curriculum. Okay, the fourth one, philosophy and intellectual pursuits. First, how do you define the concept of truth, and do you think it's possible to ever fully grasp it? I'm not going to get into that because I already said that's not something that I believe in, and I've spoken about that in another video, so if you want to check that one out. And the second one, what philosophical ideas or theories have had the most significant impact on your worldview, and how have they shaped your thinking? I've also spoken on this before, which was existentialism, Jean Paul Sartre. Um, and lately I've been reading Kant, and his views on idealism. And I know a lot of that thinking eventually makes you like a left leaning person in politics, because you'll say, well, everything's relative, deconstruction. Yeah, like, you make, like, I was listening to, I don't remember his name right now, but he was talking about Woodrow Wilson and how he basically didn't agree with like James Madison and the ideas. Oh yeah, George Will. He's very eloquent. He's a Taurus too, and he was basically saying how uh, like Woodrow Wilson was the first that had like those ideas of like, truth is relative and truth is just something that culture makes up, and truth depends on how the culture is, so we really need to shape culture, right? Like there aren't any objective facts kind of talk. And that's very left-leaning socialist communist ideas. And I think I still don't really know where I am on the spectrum, honestly. And I also think that I'm still young enough to not really know, so and not really care. But eventually I'll get to a point, maybe in my 50s or 60s, where I'll take a side and take a stand. And it's not even important for me to do that right now, anyway. So whatever. Okay, life goals and aspirations. What steps do you think are essential to achieving your dream or becoming a politician or president for a day? Oh yeah, this was something that I was doing with ChatGPT, where I was like trying to find out what I wanted to do with my life. And how do you balance the desire for stability with the need for new experiences and challenges in your life, which was what I was talking about. I mean, it would be a dream to become a politician or a president for a day just to see what it's like. I don't think I would really want to be there for years. Maybe like a week or two, just to kind of get a sense of what that's like. Because like I would try to get at it from a psychological perspective and like take notes and then come back with like a bunch of info for people to, like the president does this and this, and there are days when this and this can be the cause of this and this, and and how do I balance the desire for stability and also the need for new experiences? Well, that's what I'm doing, because I was watching Leo. He was actually talking about how you should take a vacation from actualize.org, his video Work Less to Accomplish More. I just got started with it, but he's basically talking, he said a key word which was to me very important. He talks about goalless activities or goalless oriented activities, right? So you have goal oriented activities, which you do for an intention, but you also need to find goalless activities, right? Like he talks about going to the mall and buying clothes because it's something he likes to do, but it doesn't really have like a goal oriented end, right? Like I'm doing this because I need to work up my business or whatever. Like he just did it because he liked it, right? So it's like finding those activities, right? Because I think I have the stability side like well defined, but I need to grow this other side of me where it's like more lenient, more flexible, more new experiences. Okay, number 6, social dynamics and communication. How do you think developing stronger social connections could impact your personal and professional life? And what strategies do you use to foster meaningful discussions and exchanges of ideas in group settings? This is super hard nowadays, especially when people just want to be on their phones and not paying attention. So I really don't think I use any strategies currently. Mm, do I think that developing stronger social connections could impact my personal and professional life? Maybe not, to be honest, because like I wouldn't even be getting quality, I think. So I'm very cynical about this point. So let's go to the next one. Travel and lifestyle. How do you think living in different cities and experiencing diverse cultures could influence your perspective and approach to life? And what are the key elements that make an ideal home environment for you, both in the city and in the country? So I think the first one, living, not visiting, but living in different cities, I think could open up your world completely. I actually think, like, I think Carl Jung visited different cultures and tribes to speak the way he spoke about humanity. And, they will judge a lot of European intellectuals and say, well, you're talking about humanity and man, and humans as if you know them. You've only been in Europe. You've never been out of Europe. You don't really know cultures or people, right? So I think it's important, and that's something that I do want to do with my life, because I think in order to talk about life and humans, you need to be able, you need to have the experience to back it up. So if I say something, it's because I've seen it, right? You need that evidence. It's not just all theory. So I do hope in my life I can visit and live in different cities and experience diverse cultures. And the ideal key elements of a home environment in the city and in the country, I think first and foremost is silence. I don't like dogs barking, people yelling shit. Um, but again, I'm exposed to that a lot. So it's like there's that, conflict, that tension, like if I don't like it, why did I put myself in a city that's like that, right? So I got to work that out still. And the last one to finish off, success and motivation. What do you think is the relationship between personal fulfillment and societal definitions of success, such as wealth and popularity? Well, I think a lot of societal definitions are actually personal definitions. You make them personal. So it's like, again, wealth, economic prosperity is a criteria point, and people will say, well, like in my case, well, I want it. Like, it's not because I want people to see me like that. It's because I want it. I want to have the money and the freedom and the comfort to do what I want when I want, right? um, so yeah, I think it's not, I've never really defined myself based on societal expectations of success, but more on personal fulfillment. But a lot of them is kind of paradoxical, because a lot of it depends on admiration, right? A lot of it depends on how people view me, and how people see me, and how I stimulate people. But it's not like money. It's more of like ideas, people recognizing me as like, oh, that person, can speak, that person can think, or that person has good ideas, right? That person makes me think. I like the way that person talks, right? I think it's more on those type of terms, right? Which again, people will say that's bad. You should just define success on who you are and what you do and what makes you feel good. But I can't help, uh, you know, bring that into the mix. Like, society is important to me. So I don't know. That's the thing there too. And how do you stay motivated and bounce back from setbacks when pursuing your long-term goals? I don't really have long-term goals right now. But the way in which I bounce back, I think, is just, as they say in Spanish, giving time. Like, just, you don't do anything, you can't really do anything. If you feel down, which I've been feeling down these past couple of weeks, and that's why I haven't really made videos like this, is because there's no way to get around that. You just have to, go through it, and then as soon as you start feeling better, or drink coffee. I think coffee is a big thing. Like getting coffee from a coffee shop, like, black coffee, not from home, but like black coffee really pumps me up. So that's a way to get back and stay motivated. But like I said, right now, especially with this whole business thing, I'm not really looking into doing anything or rushing into anything anymore. I was thinking of making a music video for a new rap song, which I'm working in, but I'm not really sure if I'm going to be doing that. Depends. I don't think I will, but who knows? Right now, I don't really have any projects going on. I wanted to record this video, and that's basically it. So let me know what you think about all this. So the idea is never to conform, always stay hungry, but at the same time, don't rush into things, because having high expectations can really bring you down, right? So that's all I got for this video. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.